The screaming sirens couldn't drown out the voice in Arya's head telling her to run. Not away from the fire, but straight into it. Dr. Arya Winters slammed her car door and sprinted toward the blazing apartment building, her medical bag bouncing against her hip. The emergency call had dragged her from a restless sleep, but something deeper than professional duty drove her forward now. Her skin prickled with an awareness she'd spent years suppressing, every instinct she'd buried clawing its way to the surface. "Doctor, thank God you're here." Fire Chief Martinez grabbed her arm. "We've got a child trapped on the 3rd floor. Can't get the ladder truck positioned, too much debris." Arya's eyes tracked up the building's facade, past the billowing smoke and shattered windows. On the 3rd floor, a small silhouette appeared briefly in a window before disappearing again. Her chest tightened with a pain that had nothing to do with the acrid air. "I'm going in," she said, already moving toward the building. "Doctor, that's not." But Arya was already pushing past the barricades, her movements fluid and sure despite the chaos around her. The heat hit her like a wall, yet she pressed forward, following a pull she couldn't name. Smoke stung her eyes and filled her lungs, but underneath the scent of burning wood and melting plastic, she caught something else. Something that made her heart skip. The stairwell was an inferno waiting to happen, but Arya climbed anyway, her feet finding safe purchase on steps she couldn't see. When she reached the 3rd floor, the hallway stretched before her like a tunnel of smoke and flame. But she knew exactly which door. She found the little girl in the farthest bedroom, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside an open window, unnaturally calm for a child facing death. 4 years old, maybe 5, with dark hair that caught the orange glow of distant flames. She looked up as Arya burst through the door, and the world shifted. Silver eyes. Impossibly familiar silver eyes in a face that belonged in Arya's dreams. "You smell like home, lady," the child said, her voice clear and unafraid. "Like the mama sent daddy says I lost." The words hit Arya like a physical blow. She stumbled forward, dropping to her knees beside the girl, her hands shaking as she reached out. The moment her fingers touched the child's arm, electricity shot through her. Not painful, but searingly familiar, like coming home after years of wandering in the dark. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Arya whispered, though part of her already knew. "Ember." The little girl tilted her head, studying Arya with an intensity that seemed far too old for her years. "What's yours?" "Arya." The name felt strange on her tongue, as if she'd forgotten how to say it. "We need to get you out of here, Ember." The child nodded and stood, slipping her small hand into Arya's with complete trust. "I knew someone would come. I always know." They moved through the burning building like ghosts, Arya's instincts guiding them away from weakened floors and collapsing beams. Ember never cried, never faltered, following Arya's lead with the kind of blind faith that spoke of training, or something deeper. Outside, the paramedics descended on them, checking Ember's vitals while Arya watched from a distance, her hands still tingling from the contact. The child submitted to their ministrations with patient tolerance, but her silver eyes never left Arya's face. "She's fine," one of the paramedics reported. "No smoke inhalation, no burns. It's a miracle." Chief Martinez approached Arya, shaking his head in amazement. "How did you know exactly where to find her? And how the hell did you both make it out without a scratch?" Arya opened her mouth to answer, but found she had no explanation that would make sense. Instead, she watched as a man in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd, his dark hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, his face a mask of controlled concern. "Ember," he called out, and the little girl's head snapped toward him. For the first time since Arya had found her, Ember looked afraid. The man, clearly her father, reached them in seconds, scooping Ember into his arms with practiced ease. "Thank you," he said to Arya, his voice carefully neutral. "You saved my daughter." Something in his tone made Arya's hackles rise. She stepped closer, her protective instincts flaring. "Is she hurt? Does she need medical attention?" "She's fine." His grip on Ember tightened, almost imperceptibly. "We have our own medical team." Ember's small arms wound around her father's neck, but over his shoulder, her silver eyes found Arya's again. "Don't let me go back to training today," she whispered, loud enough for only Arya to hear. "I want to stay with you." The plea hit Arya like a dagger to the chest. She took another step forward, every fiber of her being screaming that something was wrong, that she couldn't let this child disappear into the night. "Training," Arya repeated, her voice sharper than she intended. The man's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Private lessons. Nothing that concerns you, doctor." He turned to leave, Ember still in his arms. "Wait." Arya called out, but they were already walking away, disappearing into the maze of emergency vehicles and gathering crowd. Ember's small face appeared one last time over her father's shoulder, silver eyes wide with an emotion Arya couldn't name. Then they were gone, leaving Arya standing alone in the aftermath of a fire that had changed everything she thought she knew about herself. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the black sedan pull away from the curb. Something was wrong. Everything was wrong. The way Ember had looked at her, spoken to her, trusted her completely. It wasn't the behavior of a stranger's child. And that whispered plea, "Don't let me go back to training today." Training for what? And why did the thought of that little girl being taken away feel like losing a piece of her own soul? Chapter 2. The drive back to Shadowmoon territory should have taken 20 minutes. Dominic Blackthorne made it in 12, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked in protest. In the rearview mirror, Ember sat strapped into her car seat, unnaturally quiet, her silver eyes staring out the window with an expression far too thoughtful for a 4-year-old. "Ember." His voice came out rougher than intended. "What happened back there?" She didn't answer immediately, and when she did, her words made his chest tighten. "She smelled like the dreams, Daddy." "What dreams?" Dominic pulled into the long driveway that led to the pack house, gravel crunching under the tires. "The ones where I have a mama who sings to me." Ember's reflection met his eyes in the mirror. Her wolf scent was underneath the people scent. "Just like mine is underneath." Dominic's foot hit the brake harder than necessary. Ember had never talked about dreams before, had never mentioned wanting a mother beyond the casual questions all cubs asked. And she'd certainly never demonstrated the ability to scent wolf beneath human skin. That kind of recognition usually didn't develop until adolescence. The pack house loomed before them, a sprawling structure of stone and timber nestled against the mountainside. Home to 37 wolves, led by Dominic for the past 6 years. It had been his sanctuary, his fortress, the place where he'd built a new life after losing everything that mattered. Everything except Ember. Alpha. Marcus, his beta, jogged down the front steps as Dominic lifted Ember from the car. "The fire, is she hurt?" "She's fine." Dominic settled his daughter on his hip, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. Physically, anyway. Marcus fell into step beside them as they entered the house. The main hall buzzed with activity despite the early hour. Pack members who'd heard about the fire, who'd felt their alphas distress through the bond and come running. But Dominic barely acknowledged them. His mind was still back at that building, watching his carefully controlled daughter melt into a stranger's arms. "Sir." Elena, the pack's healer, approached with the same expression she'd worn when delivering bad news about pack injuries. "The scout you sent to investigate, he found something." Dominic's step faltered. 3 months ago, he'd finally decided to look into Ember's origins more deeply. Not because he doubted she was his, the bond between them was absolute, but because her power was growing beyond anything he'd seen in a cub her age. Power that seemed to call to something, somewhere, with increasing intensity. "In my office," he said quietly. He settled Ember on the leather couch in his private study, grabbing her favorite blanket from the cabinet. She accepted it without complaint, curling up like a small animal, but her eyes stayed alert, watching. Always watching. Elena closed the door behind them and pulled out a tablet. Thomas traced the adoption agency that handled Ember's placement 4 years ago. "They're gone, building burned down 2 years back, all records destroyed." But he found the caseworker who processed the paperwork. And she remembered the case because it was unusual. A young woman, early 20s, brought the baby in herself. No family, no support system, but she kept asking specific questions about the adoptive family. Wanted to know about their security, their ability to protect the child, their distance from major medical centers. Dominic frowned. What kind of questions? Questions someone would ask if they knew their child might be in danger. Elena swiped to the next screen. The caseworker remembered something else. The young woman had scars. Lots of them. Like she'd been in a fight for her life. The room seemed to contract around Dominic. He'd always assumed Ember's mother had been human, someone who couldn't handle raising a wolf child. The alternative, that she'd been pack, that she'd given up her cub for reasons he couldn't fathom, had been too painful to consider. "There's more," Elena continued. Thomas showed the caseworker some photos. Old pack registry pictures, newspaper clippings, social media. She paused, meeting his eyes. She identified the mother. Dominic's heart stopped. "Ooh, Dr. Arya Winters. The same woman who pulled Ember from that fire tonight." The tablet slipped from Elena's hands, clattering to the floor. For a moment, The only sound in the room was Ember's soft breathing from the couch and the thunderous roar of Dominic's pulse in his ears. "That's impossible," he whispered. "The timeline fits. 4 years ago, Dr. Winters was finishing her residency in pediatric medicine. She disappeared from her program for 6 months, then returned with no explanation. Her colleagues thought she'd had a breakdown." Dominic sank into his chair, his mind reeling. Aria Winters, the human doctor who'd risked her life to save his daughter, was Ember's biological mother. The woman he'd spent 4 years hating for abandoning them was the same woman who'd just charged into a burning building without hesitation. Why? The word came out broken. Why would she give her up and then? A soft whimper from the couch cut him off. Ember was stirring, her small body beginning to convulse in a way Dominic recognized with growing alarm. Her eyes rolled back, showing only white, and her limbs began to elongate, bones shifting beneath her skin. "Shifting episode," Elena breathed, already moving toward her medical bag. "At her age, this could—" "No!" Dominic was on his feet, crossing to Ember in 2 strides. "She's too young. The stress of the fire must have triggered something." Ember's back arched, a sound somewhere between a sob and a growl escaping her throat. Her fingernails began to lengthen into claws, and Dominic felt his own wolf respond to his cub's distress, pushing against his human form. "Get the sedative," he ordered Elena, but even as he spoke, he knew it might be too late. Forced shifting in cubs could be fatal, their human forms too fragile to withstand the violent transformation. Ember's eyes snapped open, wild and silver, and she let out a cry that was purely wolf. The sound shattered something in Dominic's chest, but before he could reach for her, the office door burst open. I could hear her from the parking lot. Dr. Aria Winters stood in the doorway, her hair disheveled, her clothes still smelling of smoke. "Let me help." "How did you?" Dominic started, but Aria was already moving past him, dropping to her knees beside the couch. "Ember, sweetheart," she said, her voice low and soothing. "Look at me." The convulsing child turned toward the sound, her silver eyes unfocused but seeking. Aria reached out slowly, placing her hands on either side of Ember's face, and began to hum, a low, wordless melody that seemed to resonate in the bones. "What is she doing?" Elena whispered, but Dominic couldn't answer. He was transfixed by the sight of his daughter's rigid muscles beginning to relax, her breathing evening out. Aria's humming grew more distinct, resolving into what Dominic recognized as an ancient pack lullaby. One his own mother had sung to him, and her mother before her. But how could a human doctor know songs that were passed down only through wolf bloodlines? "That's it, little one," Aria murmured, her thumbs stroking gently over Ember's cheekbones. "Let it settle. Let it rest. You're safe." Ember's claws retracted slowly, her bones shifting back to their human proportions. Within minutes, she was fully human again, exhausted but stable, curled against Aria's chest like she belonged there. "Impossible," Elena breathed. "No one outside the pack should know how to do that." Aria looked up at Dominic, her green eyes wide with confusion and something that might have been fear. "I don't know how I knew," she said quietly. "I just did." Dominic studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. But all he saw was a woman as shaken as he was, holding his daughter with a tenderness that made his chest ache. "Dr. Winters," he said carefully, "I think we need to talk." She nodded, her arms tightening protectively around Ember. "I think you're right. But first," she looked down at the child, who was already drifting toward sleep. "She needs to rest. And she needs to know she's safe." "She's always safe with me," Dominic said, a edge creeping into his voice. "I'm sure she is." Aria's tone was diplomatic, but her eyes held challenge. "But she just went through a traumatic shifting episode. In my experience." "Your experience?" Dominic stepped closer. "And what experience would that be, doctor? What experience does a human pediatrician have with wolf cubs?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Aria's face went pale, but she didn't look away. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But I know what I saw tonight. I know what I felt when I touched her. And I know that little girl needs more than strength training and discipline. She needs what?" Dominic's voice was dangerously low. "She needs her mother." The words hit him like a physical blow. Around them, the room had gone completely silent. Elena stood frozen by her medical bag, and even the usual sounds of the pack house seemed muted. "Her mother abandoned her," Dominic said, each word carefully controlled. "Left her in a human adoption agency with nothing but a note saying she couldn't provide what the child needed. Aria's face crumpled with pain so genuine that Dominic felt his certainty waver. I would never, she started, then stopped, her hand flying to her temple. God, why can't I remember? Remember what? Anything. Her voice broke. 4 years ago, I lost 6 months of my life. I woke up in a hospital with no memory of how I got there, covered in scars I couldn't explain. The doctor said trauma, but I knew it was more than that. I knew I'd lost something important, but I could never remember what. Dominic felt the floor shift beneath him. Everything he'd believed, everything he'd built his hatred on, began to crumble. Ember, Aria whispered, looking down at the sleeping child. When I saw her tonight, it was like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. On the couch, Ember stirred, her silver eyes opening to focus on Aria's face. Mama, she whispered, the word barely audible. Aria's breath caught, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know. But Dominic knew. He could see it in the way they held each other, in the perfect fit of Ember's small body against Aria's, in the ancient lullaby she'd sung without thinking, and the instinctive knowledge that had saved his daughter's life. Dr. Aria Winters was Ember's mother, and somehow she'd lost all memory of the life she'd lived before giving birth to his daughter. The question that remained was why, and what had happened to make her forget the most important thing in her world. Chapter 3. The hospital room felt too small to contain the weight of revelation hanging between them. Dominic stood frozen in the doorway, watching Aria cradle his daughter, their daughter, with the same fierce protectiveness he remembered from before. Before the night that had torn his world apart and left him believing the woman he'd loved more than life itself was dead. For years of mourning, of raising Ember alone, of carefully crafted lies to protect a little girl from the truth that her mother had been murdered by enemies of the pack. And now Aria sat before him, alive and breathing and completely unaware that she was looking at the man who'd once held her heart in his hands. Dominic? Elena's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you all right? He couldn't answer, couldn't do anything but stare at the woman who'd haunted his dreams, whose absence had left a wound in his soul that never healed. She looked the same, the thick auburn hair, the stubborn set to her jaw, the way she tucked a strand behind her ear when she was thinking. But there were differences, too. New lines around her eyes, a wariness that hadn't been there before, and scars along her forearms that made his wolf rage against his skin. Someone had hurt her. Someone had taken her from him, and somehow she'd survived but lost everything that made her who she was. Dr. Winters, he said carefully, testing how her name felt on his tongue after years of silence. How long have you been in Millbrook? 3 years, she replied, not looking up from Ember, who was drifting in and out of sleep against her chest. I transferred here from Denver after, she paused, that familiar gesture of tucking hair behind her ear. After I needed a fresh start. Denver. That was where the attacks had happened, where he'd lost her trail in a maze of burned buildings and blood, where he'd searched for weeks before finally accepting that she was gone. And before Denver? He moved closer, drawn by instincts that had never stopped recognizing her as his mate, even when his mind had given up hope. I don't remember much before Denver. Her voice was steady, but he caught the slight tremor underneath. There was an accident. Head trauma. I lost about 6 months of my life. Not an accident. Dominic's hands clenched into fists as fragments of memory surfaced. The panic in her voice over the phone, the scent of fear and blood when he'd finally tracked her to that warehouse, the sight of flames consuming everything while he searched desperately for any sign of her body. Some things are better forgotten, Elena said quietly, but her eyes were on Dominic, warning him to be careful. Maybe. Aria's arms tightened around Ember. But sometimes you lose more than just memories. Sometimes you lose pieces of yourself you didn't even know were missing. Mama. Ember's sleepy voice cut through the tension. She lifted her head, silver eyes focusing on Aria's face with an intensity that made Dominic's chest tighten. Are you my real mama? The question hung in the air like a live wire. Aria went very still, her breathing shallow, while Ember watched her with the patient expectation of a child who'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. Aria started, then stopped, looking helplessly at Dominic. I don't know, sweetheart. I wish I did. Daddy said you went away, Ember continued, her small hand reaching up to touch Aria's cheek. But you came back. I knew you would come back. Dominic felt something break inside his chest. All those careful explanations. All those nights when Ember had asked where her mama was, and he'd told her that sometimes people had to go away, but that didn't mean they didn't love their little girls. He'd thought he was protecting her from the brutal truth of loss. Instead, he'd given her hope. "Ember," he said gently, moving to sit on the edge of the hospital bed. "Dr. Winters is a very nice lady, but—" "She's not just nice," Ember interrupted, her voice carrying a certainty that silenced him. "She smells like home, Daddy. Like the dreams where someone sings to me and makes the scared feelings go away." Arya made a soft sound, somewhere between a sob and a gasp. "I've had dreams too," she whispered. "About a little girl with silver eyes. About singing lullabies I didn't remember learning." "The pack songs," Ember said, sitting up straighter. "You know the pack songs? Dr. Elena says only wolf mamas know those." The words hit Dominic like a physical blow. He looked at Elena, who was watching the interaction with growing amazement, then back at Arya. She was staring at Ember as if seeing her for the first time, her face pale with shock. "I sang to you," Arya said slowly, the words seeming to come from somewhere deep inside her. "When you were scared, I would sing the old songs. The ones my grandmother taught me before." She stopped abruptly, pressing a hand to her temple. "God, why can't I remember?" "Because someone took it from you," Dominic said quietly. "Someone took you from us." Arya's eyes snapped to his, searching his face. "Us? Daddy gets sad when he talks about mamas," Ember said matter-of-factly. "He tries to hide it, but I can smell the hurt feelings on him. Marcus says it's because he loved my mama very much." "Ember," Dominic warned, but she was already turning back to Arya. "Will you stay this time?" The question came out small and hopeful, breaking Dominic's heart all over again. "Daddy tries to teach me everything, but I want mama lessons too. Please don't go away again." The plea hung between them, raw and desperate. Arya's eyes filled with tears, and Dominic watched her struggle with emotions she couldn't name, instincts she couldn't understand. "I don't know how to be someone's mama," she whispered. "I don't remember how." "It's okay," Ember said, reaching for Arya's hand. "I can teach you. I'm very smart for my age. Marcus says so." Despite everything, Dominic felt his lips twitch. His daughter's matter-of-fact confidence in the face of impossible situations was something she'd inherited honestly, from both her parents. "Ember," he said gently. "Dr. Winters has her own life. Her own job. She can't just—" "Why not?" Ember's silver eyes turned to him, holding a challenge that reminded him forcefully of her mother. "She saved me from the fire. She stopped the scary wolf feelings. She knows the songs. And she smells like she belongs with us." "Because it's complicated, little one," Arya said softly. "There are things I don't understand, things I can't remember. And your daddy." She looked at Dominic, and he saw recognition flicker in her green eyes, faint but undeniable. "There's something about you. Something familiar, but I can't." "Take your time," Elena interrupted, moving closer to the bed. "Dr. Winters, you've been through a severe trauma tonight. Both the fire and—" she gestured vaguely at Ember. "This situation. You should rest." "I don't want to rest," Arya said, her voice gaining strength. "I want to understand. Ember, when you say I went away, what did your daddy tell you happened?" Ember looked at Dominic, seeking permission. He nodded reluctantly, knowing the truth would come out eventually. "He said you loved me very much, but sometimes mamas have to go away to keep their babies safe," Ember recited. "He said it wasn't because you didn't want me, but because bad people might hurt me if you stayed. And he said maybe someday, when I was bigger and stronger, you might come back." Arya's face crumpled. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I don't remember." "It's okay," Ember said, wrapping her small arms around Arya's neck. "You're here now, and you can learn to remember. Daddy says sometimes the important things come back if you try hard enough." Dominic closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the scene before him. His daughter, who'd never shown more than polite interest in any of the pack females who'd tried to mother her, was clinging to Arya like she'd found her missing piece. And Arya, despite her confusion and fear, was holding Ember like she'd been born to it. "There are tests," Elena said quietly. "DNA tests, if you want to be certain." "I don't need tests," Ember said firmly. "She's my mama. I can feel it in my bones." "Wolves mate for life," Dominic found himself saying, the words torn from somewhere deep inside him. "When we find our true mate, we know. There's no mistaking it." Arya looked at him sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that 4 years ago, I thought I lost everything that mattered to me." He met her eyes, letting her see the truth he'd kept buried. "I'm saying that my daughter recognizes you because you are her mother. And I'm saying that if you'll let me, I'd like to help you remember why you loved us enough to sacrifice everything to keep us safe." The room went silent except for the soft sound of Ember's breathing. Arya stared at him, and Dominic saw the moment recognition flickered stronger, bringing with it a fear that cut him to the bone. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared of what I might remember. What if there's a reason I forgot? What if I'm not the person you think I am?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Dominic said simply. "All three of us." Ember lifted her head, looking between her parents with an expression far too wise for her years. "Will you try, Mama? Will you try to remember us?" Arya was quiet for a long moment, her fingers stroking through Ember's dark hair. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I'll try, baby girl. I'll try." Chapter 4. The Shadowmoon Pact compound sprawled across 50 acres of pristine forest, a mixture of modern buildings and traditional structures that seemed to grow from the mountainside itself. Arya followed Dominic's black SUV up the winding road, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter with each mile. She'd agreed to visit, to see how Ember lived, but everything about this place made her wolf instincts. Instincts she was still struggling to accept, howl with familiarity. "And loss. You okay back there, sweetheart?" she asked, glancing in the rearview mirror at Ember, who'd insisted on riding with her instead of her father. "Daddy's nervous," Ember said matter-of-factly. "His scent gets all sharp when he's worried about something. He wants you to like our home." Arya's chest tightened. Even at 4 years old, Ember was reading emotions and pack dynamics within sophistication that should have been impossible. What kind of childhood produced that level of awareness? The main house came into view, a massive structure of stone and timber that managed to look both welcoming and fortress-like. Pack members moved around the grounds with purposeful efficiency, and Arya caught glimpses of training areas, gardens, and what looked like a sophisticated security system. "Welcome to Shadowmoon," Dominic said as they parked, his tone carefully neutral. But Arya could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes searched her face for any sign of recognition. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. The compound was breathtaking, but more than that, it felt like home in a way that made her heart ache. "How long have you lived here?" 6 years. I became alpha after." He stopped, glancing at Ember, who was bouncing on her toes with excitement. "After the previous alpha stepped down. There was a story there, one tied to whatever had happened 4 years ago, but before Arya could ask, a small crowd of pack members approached. They moved with the easy confidence of people comfortable in their own skin, but Arya noticed how they kept a respectful distance from Dominic, how their eyes tracked to Ember with protective fondness. "Everyone, this is Dr. Arya Winters," Dominic said, his alpha voice carrying easily across the group. "Ember's doctor from last night." The introduction was careful, giving nothing away, but Arya saw the way several pack members froze, saw the sharp intake of breath from a woman who looked to be in her 50s. "Arya." The woman stepped forward, her eyes wide with shock. "Is it really?" "Sarah." Dominic's voice carried a warning. "Dr. Winters is here to see how Ember is settling in after her ordeal." Sarah nodded quickly, but her eyes never left Arya's face. "Of course. It's just you look so much like." "Like who?" Arya asked, but Sarah was already backing away, clearly unwilling to disobey her alpha's indirect order to stay silent. "Like someone we used to know," Dominic said quietly. "Someone who would have loved to see how strong Ember has become." Before Arya could respond, Ember tugged on her hand. "Come on. I want to show you everything. The training rooms and the gardens and my room and—" "Slow down, little one," Arya laughed, allowing herself to be pulled forward. "We have all day." The tour started innocently enough. Ember showed her the common areas, the library filled with both modern books and ancient texts, the kitchen where pack members gathered for communal meals. But as they moved deeper into the compound, Arya began to see the other side of Ember's life. The training facilities were extensive and sophisticated. Combat mats, weapons racks, shifting chambers designed to contain the violence of transformation. Everything was sized for adults, but Arya noticed smaller equipment scattered throughout. Child-sized practice weapons, modified training gear, protective padding designed for someone Ember's size. "This is where I train," Ember announced proudly, leading them into a large room filled with obstacle courses and training dummies. "I can shift almost all the way now." "Want to see?" "Ember," Dominic said quickly. "Remember what we discussed about showing off." But Ember was already moving, her small body beginning the fluid motion that preceded transformation. Arya watched in fascination and growing alarm as the 4-year-old's bones began to elongate, her face pushing forward into a muzzle, dark fur sprouting along her arms. The shift was beautiful and terrible, But what struck Arya most was the look of fierce concentration on Ember's partially transformed face. This wasn't play or natural exploration. This was a performance, executed with military precision. "Very good," Dominic said, and Ember beamed at the praise before shifting back to human form. "But remember to keep your core stable during the transition. We don't want any injuries." "I know, Daddy." Ember's voice held the patience of someone who'd heard this instruction many times. Stable core, controlled breathing, never let emotion drive the shift. Arya felt something cold settle in her stomach. Those weren't instructions for a child learning a natural part of her development. They were combat protocols. "She's very advanced for her age," Dominic said, moving to check Ember's form as she demonstrated a complex martial arts sequence. "Most cubs don't achieve stable shifting until 6 or 7, but Ember's been doing it since she was 3. Since she was 3? Arya couldn't keep the shock out of her voice. "Isn't that dangerous?" "Everything is dangerous for our kind," Dominic replied, his tone growing sharper. "The sooner she learns control, the safer she'll be." Arya watched Ember move through a series of defensive positions, her small body executing moves that would have challenged children twice her age. There was no joy in it, no playfulness, just grim determination and a desperate desire to please. "Can I show Mama the advanced sequence?" Ember asked, looking between her parents. "The one you said I could try when I was ready." "You're not quite," Dominic started, but Ember was already moving, launching herself at a training dummy with speed that took Arya's breath away. The sequence was impressive, a combination of strikes, grapples, and partial shifts that demonstrated incredible control for someone so young. But Arya could see the strain in Ember's face, the way she pushed herself beyond what her small body should attempt. "Ember, that's enough," Dominic called, but she was committed to the move, her partial claws extended as she attempted a complex flip that would have been challenging for an adult. She almost made it. The landing was wrong, too much force, not enough control. Ember hit the mat hard, her shoulder taking the impact with a sickening crack. Her cry of pain cut through the training room like a knife, and Arya was moving before she consciously decided to, her medical training overriding everything else. "Don't move," she ordered, dropping to her knees beside the little girl. Ember's shoulder was already swelling, her face pale with pain and something worse, shame. "I'm sorry," Ember whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I know I messed up the landing." "Shoo, baby girl," Arya murmured, her hands moving gently over Ember's injured shoulder. "It's just a sprain. Nothing broken, but you're going to be sore for a few days." "Ember knows better than to attempt moves beyond her capability," Dominic said, but Arya could hear the worry beneath his stern tone. "She's been training long enough to understand the importance of staying within her limits." "She's 4 years old," Arya said quietly, not looking up from her examination. 4-year-olds don't have limits. They have curiosity and a desire to please the people they love. The words hung between them, charged with implication. Dominic's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Ember's small hand caught Arya's wrist. "I can be strong like Daddy wants," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can learn faster, train harder. Don't leave because I'm not good enough yet." The words hit Arya like a physical blow. She looked down at this extraordinary little girl, this child who could shift at will, who spoke like a miniature adult, who approached training with the discipline of a seasoned warrior, and saw past all of it to the desperate fear underneath. "Oh, sweetheart," she breathed, gathering Ember into her arms despite the injured shoulder. "You're already good enough. You're perfect exactly as you are." "But Mama left," Ember said against Arya's shoulder. "She left because I wasn't worth staying for. But I'm getting stronger every day. Maybe if I'm strong enough, good enough, maybe she'll." She stopped, pulling back to look at Arya with heartbreaking hope. "Maybe you'll stay." Arya's heart shattered completely. She looked up at Dominic, seeing her own devastation reflected in his dark eyes. All this time, he'd been pushing Ember to excel, thinking he was preparing her for a dangerous world. But Ember had internalized something entirely different. The belief that her mother's absence was her fault, that love was something to be earned through achievement. "Ember," Arya said carefully, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your mama didn't leave because you weren't good enough. You understand me? Sometimes terrible things happen that have nothing to do with whether someone is worth loving." "Then why?" Ember's silver eyes searched Arya's face. "Why did she go away?" Arya looked at Dominic, seeing the same question in his expression. Why had she given up their daughter? What had driven her to make that impossible choice? "I don't know yet," she said honestly. But I promise you it wasn't because you weren't worth staying for. You're worth everything, baby girl. Everything. Around them, the training room had fallen silent. Arya became aware of pack members watching from the doorway, of the weight of history and expectation pressing down on them all. But in this moment, nothing mattered except the little girl in her arms who'd been carrying a burden far too heavy for her small shoulders. Can we go somewhere quieter? Arya asked Dominic. I think Ember needs some time to process this, and her shoulder needs ice and rest. Dominic nodded, his alpha mask slipping to reveal the father underneath. Worried, protective, and slowly beginning to understand the damage his well-intentioned training had caused. As they left the training room, Ember clinging to Arya's hand with her uninjured arm, Arya caught sight of the pack members' faces. She saw recognition there, and grief, and something that looked like hope. These people had known her before. They'd mourned her loss just as Dominic had. But more importantly, they'd watched a little girl grow up believing she had to earn the love that should have been hers by right. The realization settled in Arya's chest like a weight. Whatever had happened 4 years ago, whatever had made her give up her daughter, the consequences were still playing out. Ember's desperate need to excel, her emotional maturity, her willingness to push herself beyond safe limits. All of it stemmed from a fundamental belief that she wasn't lovable as she was. And somehow, Arya was going to have to find a way to heal that wound while figuring out why she'd caused it in the first place. Chapter 5. The full moon celebration should have been joyous. Pack members gathered around the massive fire pit in the compound's central courtyard, children running between adults, laughter carrying on the warm evening air. Arya sat on one of the carved log benches, watching Dominic move through the crowd with the easy authority of a leader beloved by his people. But her attention kept drifting to Ember, who was preparing for what the pack called the Cubs demonstration. A chance for young wolves to show their developing skills. She's nervous, Sarah said, settling beside Arya with 2 cups of something that smelled like honey and wildflowers. Ember's never performed in front of someone she wanted to impress before. Arya accepted the cup gratefully, inhaling the familiar scent that triggered another flash of almost memory. She shouldn't feel like she needs to impress me. But she does. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. You have to understand, Arya. Can I call you Arya? That little girl has built her entire world around the hope that someday her mama would come home. Every skill she's learned, every milestone she's reached, it's all been with the thought that maybe if she was special enough, strong enough, her mother would find her way back. The words hit like a knife to the chest. Arya watched Ember practicing her routine with 3 other cubs, her movements precise and controlled even as her eyes kept seeking Arya in the crowd. For years old, Arya murmured. She's been carrying this burden since she was 4 years old. Younger, Sarah corrected quietly. Ember's been asking about her mama since she could talk. Dominic tried to deflect at first, but she was relentless. Finally, he settled on telling her that sometimes mamas have to go away to protect their babies, but that didn't mean they didn't love them. And she interpreted that as her fault. Children do that. Sarah sipped her drink, her eyes sad. They make everything about themselves because they don't understand that sometimes terrible things just happen. In Ember's mind, if her mama loved her enough, she would have found a way to stay. So if mama left, it must be because Ember wasn't worth the fight. Before Arya could respond, Dominic's voice rang out across the gathering. Tonight, our cubs will demonstrate the skills they've been developing. Remember, we celebrate progress, not perfection. The crowd settled, turning their attention to the 4 young wolves standing in the center of the circle. Ember was the smallest by far, but she stood with the same proud bearing as the others, her silver eyes scanning the audience until they found Arya. The first cub, a boy who looked to be about 8, demonstrated basic shifting. The smooth transition from human to wolf form that was the foundation of their kind. The pack applauded warmly, encouraging shouts mixing with praise. The second cub, a girl around 10, showed her hunting techniques, stalking and pouncing on practiced targets with growing confidence. Again, the pack responded with enthusiasm, parents beaming with pride. The third cub, another boy, demonstrated combat forms, the defensive positions and controlled aggression that would serve him well as an adult warrior. His technique was solid if unrefined, earning nods of approval from the pack's fighters. Then it was Ember's turn. What Arya witnessed next defied everything she understood about child development. Ember's demonstration wasn't just advanced, it was masterful. She shifted through partial transformations with liquid grace, her human consciousness clearly in control throughout. She moved through combat sequences that would have challenged teenagers, her small body executing throws and strikes with devastating precision. But it was the final element that left the pack in stunned silence. Ember's eyes began to glow with silver light, and the air around her shimmered with power. She was demonstrating early dominance abilities, the psychic skills that usually didn't manifest until the late teens. The crowd erupted in amazement, but Arya felt only a growing sense of dread. This wasn't natural development. This was a child pushing herself far beyond safe limits, forcing abilities that should have emerged gradually over years. "Incredible," someone shouted. "She's going to be the strongest alpha female we've ever seen." "Just like her," another voice started, then cut off abruptly. Ember completed her routine and stood panting slightly, her eyes immediately seeking Arya's face. The desperate need for approval was written in every line of her small body. "Beautiful, sweetheart," Arya called out, rising to her feet. "Absolutely beautiful." The smile that lit up Ember's face was radiant, but it was what happened next that shattered Arya's composure completely. "Did you see, Mama?" Ember called out, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent gathering. "Did you see how strong I am now?" The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Ember's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror at what she'd said. Around them, the pack had gone completely still, all eyes turning between the little girl and Arya. "I'm sorry," Ember whispered, tears already starting to fall. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I know I'm not supposed to. Daddy says it makes him sad when I—" Arya was moving before she conscious thought, crossing the circle in swift strides and dropping to her knees in front of Ember. "Hey," she said softly, gathering the trembling child into her arms. "There's nothing to apologize for, baby girl. Nothing at all. But I'm not supposed to pretend," Ember sobbed against her shoulder. "Daddy says good cubs don't make things up about people who aren't really." "Ember." Dominic's voice was carefully controlled as he approached them. "Dr. Winters understands. You don't need to." "No." Arya's voice cut through his attempted damage control. She pulled back to look at Ember, her hands gently framing the little girl's tear-streaked face. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You can call me whatever feels right to you. If Mama feels right, then that's what I am. Do you understand?" Ember's breath hitched. "Really? Really?" Arya looked up at Dominic, seeing the war of emotions playing across his face. "And you never, ever have to apologize for talking about your mother. She's part of you, part of who you are. That's not something to be ashamed of." The pack gathering had dissolved into murmured conversations, but Arya barely noticed. Her focus was entirely on the little girl in her arms, on the way Ember clung to her as if afraid she might disappear. "Alpha," Elena's voice broke through the moment. The pack healer approached cautiously, her expression troubled. "Could I speak with you both? There's something about Ember that you need to know." They moved to a quieter area behind the main house, Ember still pressed close to Arya's side. Elena waited until they were out of earshot of the others before speaking. "Ember's been having nightmares," she said without preamble. "Severe ones. She's been coming to me for dream calm herbs for months now." "What kind of nightmares?" Arya asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "About her mother being hurt, being taken by bad wolves who want to keep them apart." Elena's eyes were soft with sympathy. "She talks in her sleep sometimes. Says she has to get stronger, so she can save her mama from wherever they're keeping her." Arya felt the blood drain from her face. "That's why she's pushing herself so hard. She thinks, oh God, she thinks I'm being held prisoner somewhere." "It's worse than that," Elena continued gently. "She's convinced that her training is the key to saving you. That if she can just master enough skills, become powerful enough, she'll be able to find you and fight off whatever took you away." "She's 4 years old," Arya breathed. "She's been carrying this burden since she was a baby." Dominic's face had gone ashen. "I never knew. She never told me about the dreams." "Because she doesn't want to make you sad," Elena explained. "She knows talking about her mother upsets you, so she's been dealing with this alone." Before anyone could respond, Ember tugged on Arya's hand. "Can I show you something?" she asked quietly. "Something secret?" Arya nodded, allowing herself to be led deeper into the forest behind the pack house. They walked for several minutes in comfortable silence, Ember's small hand warm and trusting in hers. Finally, they reached a cluster of large boulders surrounded by thick undergrowth. "This is my special place," Ember said, pushing aside a curtain of hanging branches to reveal a small cave-like space between the rocks. "No one else knows about it." Arya followed her into the hidden den, her heart breaking at what she found. The space had been carefully arranged with soft furs, children's books, and a collection of small treasures. But it was the centerpiece that stole her breath, a photograph of a wolf pack, positioned where it would catch the filtered sunlight. "That's you," Ember said, pointing to a silver-gray wolf in the center of the photo. "I know it's not really you, but she looks like how I imagine you in wolf form. I come here to practice." "Practice what, sweetheart?" Ember settled beside the photo, her expression solemn. "All the things I want to tell you when you come home. I practice telling you about my training, and about the books I've read, and about how I learned to make Daddy smile even when he's sad." She paused, looking up at Arya with heartbreaking sincerity. "I practice asking you if you're proud of me." Arya's vision blurred with tears. "Oh, baby girl. I am so proud of you. So incredibly proud." "Really?" Ember's face lit up. "Even though I'm still little? Even though I can't save you yet?" "You don't need to save me," Arya said firmly, pulling Ember into her lap. "That's not your job, sweetheart. Your job is to be 4 years old. To play and learn, and be loved exactly as you are. But the bad wolves? There are no bad wolves keeping me away from you," Arya interrupted gently. "I promise you that. Whatever happened before, whatever kept us apart, it's not something you need to fix." Ember was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "Then why did you go away?" It was the question Arya had been dreading, the one she still couldn't answer. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise?" Arya looked down at this extraordinary little girl. This child who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who'd been carrying adult burdens since she could walk, who'd built her entire identity around becoming strong enough to save a mother she'd never truly known. "I promise," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I promise I'm not going anywhere." Outside the den, she could hear Dominic and Elena approaching, their voices low with concern. But for now, it was just her and Ember in this secret place, surrounded by the evidence of a little girl's desperate love and unshakable hope. "Mama," Ember said softly. "Yes, baby girl? Will you help me practice? Not fighting stuff, but regular mama-baby stuff? I don't know how to do that." Arya's heart shattered and healed in the same moment. "I would love that more than anything in the world." And in that moment, sitting in a hidden den with a daughter she was only beginning to remember, Arya made a silent vow. Whatever had torn them apart 4 years ago, whatever enemies had forced her to give up her child, she would uncover the truth. Not for revenge, not for closure, but so that Ember could finally stop carrying the weight of a tragedy that had never been her fault. The little girl deserved to know that she had always been worth fighting for. Chapter 6. The scent hit Arya like a physical blow, wild magic and ancient power threaded through with something darker. She was walking back from Ember's secret den when it washed over her, triggering an instinctive response that had her wolf clawing at her human form. "Dominic," she called sharply, and he was beside her in seconds, his own nostrils flaring as he caught the scent. "Serafina," he growled, his body already shifting into a protective stance. "Elena, get Ember inside. Now!" But before Elena could reach them, a figure emerged from the treeline, an elderly woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like polished obsidian. She moved with the fluid grace of someone comfortable with power, her simple clothes belying the dangerous energy that radiated from her skin. "Hello, Arya," the witch said, her voice carrying an accent that seemed to shift between languages. "You're looking well. Different but well." "Stay back," Dominic snarled, moving between Arya and the newcomer. "You have no business here, Serafina." "On the contrary," the witch replied calmly. "I have every business here. I've been waiting for years for this moment." Her dark eyes fixed on Arya. "For the spell to break." "What spell?" Arya demanded, though something deep inside her already knew. The missing memories, the lost time, the way her wolf had been buried so deep she'd forgotten it existed. None of it had been natural trauma. "The one that saved your daughter's life," Serafina said simply. "The one that made you forget everything you were, everything you loved, so that you could disappear completely. Even from yourself." The words hit Arya like a sledgehammer. Around her, the world seemed to tilt, reality shifting as puzzle pieces began to click into place. "You did this," she whispered. "You took my memories." "I saved your memories," Serafina corrected. "Locked them away where even you couldn't find them, because Magnus Ravenclaw was inside your head, child. He was tearing through your mind like a rabid animal, and if I hadn't acted, he would have ripped every thought from your skull until he found what he was looking for." "Ember," Dominic said, his voice hollow with understanding. "The silver bloodline, Serafina confirmed. The most powerful genetic combination our kind has seen in 3 centuries. Magnus knew what that child would become, what she represented. He would have tortured Arya until she gave up every detail about the pack, about Ember's location, about her potential. Arya felt her knees give out, but Dominic caught her before she could fall. "You let me think she was dead," he said, his voice raw with 4 years of grief. "You let me raise our daughter believing her mother had abandoned her. Because the alternative was watching Magnus' wolves tear this pack apart to find her," Serafina replied, her tone gentling slightly. "The spell was designed to break only when mother and child were reunited by fate, not force. When Arya was ready to remember, when her wolf recognized what it had lost." "I don't understand," Arya managed. "If you saved my memories, then why?" The question died as pain exploded through her skull. Not physical pain, but something deeper, like walls cracking, like dams bursting. Images flooded her mind in a torrent that left her gasping. Dominic's face the first time she'd seen him, the way her wolf had recognized its mate instantly. Their mating ceremony under the full moon, surrounded by pack members who'd become family. The moment she'd realized she was pregnant, the joy and terror warring in her chest. Ember's birth, the way her daughter had emerged already shifting, silver eyes bright with impossible intelligence. The attack. Blood and smoke, and Magnus Ravenclaw's voice promising to tear her mind apart until she told him everything. The choice. The terrible, impossible choice to let Serafina lock away everything she was to protect, everything she loved. "Oh God," Arya sobbed, the memories hitting her like physical blows. "Oh God, I remember. I remember everything." She was on her knees in the forest dirt, Dominic's arms around her. But in her mind she was reliving the moment she'd made the hardest decision of her life. She'd been chained in Magnus' stronghold, her body broken but her mind still intact, when Serafina had appeared. "I can save you," the witch had whispered. "But the price is everything you are. I can lock away your memories, make you human in your own mind. You'll disappear so completely that even you won't remember what you're hiding. But you'll live, and someday when it's safe, when fate brings you back to them." "Will they be safe?" Arya had asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Your mate will protect your daughter with his life. And you'll find your way back to them when the time is right. Do it," Arya had said without hesitation. "Make me forget. Make me disappear." The memory shattered into 1,000 pieces as Arya came back to the present, tears streaming down her face. Dominic was holding her, his own face wet with tears, and she could feel his wolf's anguish mixing with her own. "You never stopped looking for me," she whispered, the realization hitting her like dawn breaking. "That's why you told Ember I went away instead of dying. You never stopped believing I'd come home." "I felt you," Dominic said roughly. "Through the mate bond. I couldn't feel you clearly, couldn't track you, but I knew you were alive somewhere. I knew you'd find your way back to us." "But Magnus," Arya started, then stopped as another wave of memory crashed over her. "He's still out there. He's still hunting Ember." "Yes," Serafina said quietly. "Which is why the Alpha has been training your daughter so intensively. Magnus' wolves have been moving closer, testing the pack's defenses. The war you sacrificed everything to prevent is coming whether we're ready or not." Arya looked up at Dominic, seeing the weight he'd been carrying for 4 years. He'd known their enemies were still out there, still hunting their daughter. Every combat lesson, every advanced technique, every moment of discipline had been preparation for a battle he'd hoped would never come. "That's why you pushed her so hard," she said, understanding flooding through her. "You weren't trying to make her grow up too fast. You were trying to keep her alive. She's the most powerful cub born in generations," Dominic said, his voice heavy with the burden of knowledge. "Magnus won't stop until he either controls that power or destroys it. I had to make sure she'd be ready." "But she's still just a baby," Arya protested. "She's 4 years old, Dominic. She should be playing with toys, not learning to fight for her life." "You think I don't know that?" Dominic's voice cracked. "You think I wanted this for her? But I've seen what Magnus does to powerful wolves who can't defend themselves. I won't let that happen to Ember. I won't let him take her like he took you." The pain in his voice broke something in Arya's chest. She reached up to cup his face, feeling the mate bond snap back into place like a rubber band released. "You did everything right," she said fiercely. "You kept her safe. You kept her strong. And you never let her forget she was loved." "Mama? Daddy?" They turned to see Ember approaching cautiously, Elena close behind her. The little girl's silver eyes were wide with concern, and Arya realized she could feel her daughter's emotions now. The fear, the confusion, the desperate hope that whatever was happening wouldn't tear her family apart again. "It's okay, baby girl," Arya said, opening her arms. Ember ran to her without hesitation, and Arya marveled at how perfectly her daughter fit against her chest. "Everything's okay now." "Who's the lady?" Ember asked, eyeing Serafina with the wariness of a child who'd been taught to be suspicious of strangers. "Someone who helped keep you safe," Arya said carefully. "A long time ago, when you were just a baby." Serafina stepped forward, her expression softening as she looked at Ember. "You've grown strong, little silver wolf. Your mother would be proud." "My mama's right here," Ember said with 4-year-old logic. "She came back like Daddy said she would." "Yes," Serafina smiled. "She did. But I'm afraid your family's trials aren't over yet. Magnus knows the spell has broken. He'll be coming for you soon." "Let him come," Dominic growled, his alpha power radiating through the forest. "This time we'll be ready." "This time we'll be together," Arya corrected, standing with Ember in her arms. The little girl was heavier than she'd expected, solid and real and perfect in a way that made her chest ache with love. "The silver bloodline," Serafina said, watching them with something like satisfaction. 3 generations of power coming together. Magnus has no idea what he's really up against. 3 generations? Arya frowned. "Your grandmother's gift runs true," the witch explained. "The ability to touch minds, to influence thoughts and emotions, combined with your mate's alpha strength and your daughter's natural dominance." She shrugged. "Magnus thinks he's hunting a powerful cub. He has no idea he's about to face a unified pack with bloodline advantages he can't even comprehend." Arya felt something shift inside her. Not just the return of her memories, but the awakening of abilities she'd forgotten she possessed. The silver bloodline wasn't just about power. It was about connection, about the ability to strengthen pack bonds and share strength across the group. "When will he come?" she asked. "Soon," Serafina replied. "But first you need time to rebuild what was broken. Your daughter needs time with her mother, and your mate needs time to heal from 4 years of believing he'd failed to protect you." "You didn't fail," Arya told Dominic fiercely. "You never failed. You saved her, you saved me, you saved the pack. You held everything together when it should have fallen apart." "I missed so much," Dominic said, his voice breaking. Her first words, her first shift, for years of watching her grow up. "We'll make new memories," Arya promised. "All of us together. We'll teach her that she doesn't have to be perfect to be loved, that she doesn't have to earn her place in this family. And when Magnus comes for her, he'll find out what happens when you threaten a united pack family." Ember looked up at her with those impossibly wise silver eyes. "Are we really going to be okay, Mama?" Arya looked at her daughter, at the mate who'd never stopped believing she'd come home, at the pack that had become her family. The memories were still settling, still finding their proper places in her mind, but one thing was crystal clear. "Yes, baby girl," she said with absolute certainty. "We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be everything we were meant to be." And for the first time in 4 years, Arya Blackthorn, not Winters but Blackthorn, mate to the alpha and mother to the most powerful cub born in generations, felt complete. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe and like this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to know the country in which you are listening to this story. Which country is that? Please comment below.